Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Laurie Campbell. I'm the Manager of Diversity for Enbridge, actually, but have been lucky enough to be working with APEGA over the last year. And like Nancy, I'm not an engineer either, but I seem to be spending an awful lot of time with them. And I think I'm kind of catching on to what I've been missing all these years. So it's really been my pleasure to work with them. Nancy laid some great groundwork for the project that we're going to present to you today on behalf of APEGA. But before we get into that, it's my pleasure to introduce my co-presenter, GAIL POWLEY. Oh, I'm not done. I'm not going to present her. So GAIL POWLEY, hold your applause, is the Vice President of Corporate Development of Willow Glen Systems, a global SCADA provider which is headquartered in Alberta. GAIL has over 25 years' experience in the industrial automation and technology space, leading initiatives with organizations such as Suncor, Syncrude, Petro-Canada, ExxonMobil, Nova Chemical, Irving Oil, ConocoPhillips, and MEG Energy. GAIL has been an avid volunteer, and I've been lucky enough to keep crossing paths with her in this role, and contributed to initiatives which build a stronger workforce for tomorrow. GAIL is on university advisory boards, a director with the Alberta Women's Science Network, a past vice chair of WISES, Women in Scholarship, Engineering, Science and Technology, and has been recognized as Mentor of the Millennium. She's chair of APEGA's Women in Engineering Committee, which is what we're doing together today. GAIL is also co-founder of BEST, Bridge for Engineering, Science and Technology Talent, and an active mentor and advisor with BEST Volunteer Arm Mentor Up. GAIL is part of many industry associations and has served on the executive team of the Washington, D.C.-based NPRA, National Petrochemical and Refining Association, Process Automation and Decision Support Committee, and is now the Vice President of the CHOA, Canadian Heavy Oil Association. GAIL holds a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the University of Alberta and is married with 3 teenage girls. Now you can applaud.
All right, thank you very much, Laurie, and definitely a pleasure to be here today on behalf of APEGA. It's been my honor to be founding chair, or at least the inaugural chair of the Women in APEGA Committee, and I am an engineer. How many people in this room are engineers? I'm talking to the right audience in many respects. Of course, the nice thing about working with such a prestigious and important organization as APEGA is any policy, any guidelines that we put forward have credibility and can affect the industries that the engineers touch. So not only is this a valuable initiative for APEGA and the engineering and geoscience professions, but it's an important document for the heavy oil industry and for refining and for, I can go on, right? And so I do have a presentation. I won't extend that list, but I am very pleased to see APEGA's name on this document for managing transitions before, during, and after leave, a planning resource guide for employees and employers. Can everyone help me give a hand for APEGA on this? So part of the rollout of this document, which is fresh off the presses, is this is the very first presentation, and we'll be giving a series of presentations throughout the year. So be sure to attend your nearest branch luncheon meeting, as well as APEGA has a booth and has some limited copies of this document. And the document itself will be on the website, and of course you'll hear about it in the PEG and more. So, without too much preamble, I'll launch into the presentation, which is right behind me. Just a minute. Oh, excellent, okay. All right, so managing transitions. As mentioned, this is a guideline document prepared by the Women in APEGA Committee. So the committee is exciting because we started with about a dozen high-powered women in engineering fields. And once the word got out that this committee existed, we had more and more and more and more and more volunteers. We have more people, men and women, thankfully, which is really an important part of the value of this committee, is that with APEGA, we can draw upon men to help make this cultural change. It is so important. Diversity is so important wherever you go. We can't do everything with all men in one side and all women in the other, right? We do need to work together to bring forward these very important changes because it benefits everyone. So many people, Len Shrimpton is here today, Senior Director of APEGA, who handles this document, as well as Jessica Vandenberg, Director of Member Services and Professional Development. And they recognize that not only is it important to have women for the reasons of a larger workforce, but also it's the diverse perspective, right? Men attack things one way, women have a different way of doing so. It's pretty exciting with the speakers here today. I am on the Vice President of the Canadian Heavy Oil Association, as is Bill Whitelaw of June Warren Publishing. And his topic is how the energy industry really needs women because of our approach. We are more collaborative. We communicate better, and really that's one of the largest issues the oil industry has today, not communicate well with the public and important stakeholders, so that, again, we're developing a solution together versus they win, I lose scenario, right? We need to work on this together and win together. So very important. On my committee, I'll quote another individual, being Larry Staples, who's a past president of APEGA, where he feels he's on the committee not only because it's important for women in APEGA, he feels it's important for the sustainability of the profession for these reasons. So again, amazing support. So please don't stop volunteering. We have recently restructured our committee so we can take on more volunteers. And we need them in many different capacities, including spreading the word at presentations like this. All right, back on topic. Sorry, Jessica. All right, so on managing transitions. Overall, engineers understand management of change. It's about mitigating risk and reducing the probability of a failure. Those that are involved in project management know that you have to monitor the project and budget, and you have to anticipate what will happen and forecast step and then plan forward. However, many of us don't do this well with our own careers, and many managers and employers don't do this well with managing their staff. Everyone knows there's going to be a transition that's going to make the workload, the career a challenge. How many are helping their employees or their team members manage through this? So Women in APEGA has recognized that this is a gap, and therefore our top priority was to draft this document. We have other documents, other policies definitely scheduled, but this was the top priority. We recognize that retention was a key issue, but because by improving retention, we can thus have more people that can advance, and those role models will be able to help attract more women into the profession. But without affecting retention, we will continue to have this problem with attraction where our numbers continue to go down. We need to be up there showing that this is a great career for women. So, definition of a career. So a career is defined by the Oxford English Dictionary as a person's choice of progress through life, course of progress through life. Career is also frequently understood to relate only to the working aspects of an individual's life, usually pursued within a single sector. Careers in engineering and geosciences are very demanding and rewarding. In the past, most engineers and geoscientists had stay-at-home partners who took on the major caregiving role for young children. Thus, their careers were not significantly impacted. Thus, that's why the professions are the way they are today. However, today, the partners are also career professionals, and often engineers and geosciences too. So how do you balance having children and dual career families? So managing transitions is the key to that. And this document is broken into two parts. It's broken into a checklist for all key stakeholders, for the employers, employees, as well as putting in place the workplace practices. So normally when you're looking at this policy, you would look upon it side-by-side document. Obviously, we're gonna have to go through it sequentially, so just bear with us. We'll be going through the checklists first. So a little bit more on a family transition. One thing that I found personally in my life is that I recognize that I'm investing a lot of time and money and pain and suffering in my engineering education. I'm not doing that just so I can have a career that's going to last 5 years, right? I think all of you have gone through that. So 4+ years of hard work. You get out in the field, and then you're going to have children, but your career is going to last 30 or more years, right? So having young children is a period that is only 2 to 5 years. So in the whole scheme of things, I recognize my employer should be looking at me saying, okay, 30 years, I can manage, be flexible for a couple of years, right? I certainly have proven that I'm a very committed employee, get great results, so of course my employer should want to be a little bit accommodating in order to get great rewards. And so that was how I always looked at things, and that's the expectations I've always had of my employers. And really, most of them will understand that is just reasonable. So you hold your expectations to be reasonable, and your employers, once they understand where you're coming from and see your results, they want you back. They're going to want to make sure that they understand that you understand that you're valued, and that they're going to make small accommodations that make business sense. We all know this needs to make business sense, right? And I'll be going through the business case a little further. So overall in your career, parenthood for a short period of time. Overall, we're going to get through that period, have a lot of fun with our kids, but certainly not give up on our careers at the same time. I really enjoyed hearing the story of 4 children. I have 3, and I thought that was a lot, but at the same time, I felt it was important that my children see me as a role model, and that if I gave up on my career, I did not want to set that up as an example for them. And so far, I have one that wants to be a doctor, one that wants to be a lawyer, and one that I really hope wants to be an engineer. I haven't given up yet. All right, so career management, lifetime endeavor, and the benefits of managing through this transition for employees, you know yourself. For employers, they can look forward to retaining a trained employee for a long time. And APEGA professions will benefit from greater innovation through increased numbers and the benefits of diversity. So moving forward to the really 5 main points in this presentation for the Managing Transitions document. So number 1, we'll be going through the business case, which gives a bit of perspective as to why workplaces should use this document. What I really love about this document, is that when our committee members were part of drafting this, they said, this is great, can I take this to my HR department? So we didn't even have to ask them to. They wanted to run to their HR department to do so. And the great news is the HR department is looking for something like this, right? And the comments coming back were, the HR department says, wow, this is such low-hanging fruit. This is easy to do. It's not expensive, and it has value. So this is wonderful. Thank you, right? So often as a minority asking for something different, we feel uncomfortable asking for it. The good news is people are looking for this answer. And when you have someone like APEGA saying this is what should be done, you're going to have a lot of support. So moving right along. So this, the nice thing about this document is it's not too onerous, right? It's not really thick, and there's checklists. I know as an engineer I like checklists, right? Making sure that I'm on schedule and I don't forget anything. And also it has a workplace policy framework so that the HR department will know how to implement it. And there's some great references and resources. I think many of you know there's a lot of great work out there. So often, though, what happens is if it's done in the finance area or any other profession, you always get people in your own profession saying, yeah, but that's different. Engineering's different. Oil's different, right? Well, this is how different it is. Read it. And you know what? The nice thing about engineers, most of us are smart enough, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. And so we have a lot of good case studies. Catalyst has a lot of good information. Great resource document, and like I say, it's really well received by a wide variety of audiences. So business case, let's start with the business case. From a business perspective, when you choose to go on leave and care for your child, whether you are a father or mother, your company will temporarily have to lose a valuable employee, someone who has knowledge, experience, skills, and talent. All the while, they recognize that you may not return. It's clearly a business risk that needs to be managed properly, and therefore they have an incentive to do so. The best way is to help maintain business continuity. That's an interesting word, and maybe I'll provide the soft skill part that women do very well. Business continuity, relationships, right? Large part of the problem is when you go on leave, that relationship you have with that whole community is at risk, right? So you aren't there anymore, people can move on. If companies and your mentors, your sponsors can help keep that relationship there up, and it takes both sides to keep up a relationship, the odds of you returning, of anyone returning, male or female, are so much higher. And that is an aspect that's well covered in this policy. So very important to mitigate that risk by managing a person's, whether it's communications, helping them understand that there's a great job coming back for them, that we're ready to support them. You need to manage all the expectations, and you need to deliver to them when an employee is about to go on leave and when they come back. So, of course, when you're trying to sell any new program to management, you need numbers, and here's some numbers here. So if you're looking to encourage, your HR department knows all these numbers, by the way. So perhaps people here in the room don't, and it's good for you to be charged with this information. So it costs about 40% of an annual salary to get a new entry-level employee. So if you're 2 years into your career and then you take time off, for them to, and you don't come back, for them to train a new person, it costs 40% of your annual salary. If you're at the middle of your career, it costs 150%. If you're a senior person that doesn't come back, that's 400% of your salary. So there's a lot of incentive to keep you engaged. And of course, on top of the time and money, because of course it takes time to find those people and to train them up, Lori brought up an important point. There's organizational knowledge that may never be recaptured. So it is quite a big impact on the business to lose you. So they don't really want to lose you. So if we work together with them on how to retain us and others, it really has great business value. So as mentioned, there's a number of checklists in this document. The first checklist I'll talk about is the employer checklist. The number one item is to ensure employee safety. That's generally talking about two aspects, but one, if you're expecting and you're on site, you may not be able to go through the vessel walk or the ladders that you used to do. So certainly employers want to make sure that their employees are always safe, and that they be put on some restricted duty if needed. That happens sometimes, doesn't happen that very often. It did happen in one of my pregnancies that I was just put on different duty, and there's so many things that need to be done. It wasn't an issue for my employer at all. So next on, keep your employees part of the corporate culture despite their not being physically present. So the wonderful observation that we had within the program committee was the men in the committee did not realize, and only heard by talking with the women, that when you go on parental leave, many companies treat that like a severance. And you're discommunicated, you don't have email contact, and they shake your hand and say, look forward to seeing you in a year, and that's it. And you're thinking, wow, here I've been working night and day on projects. If I have multiple children, I've been missing that baseball practice. And all to the point where, they know you're going to be leaving soon because you're going to have a baby, and they're disengaging you from the organization. Some people would actually call that the walking dead. And so very important not to do that. As employers, we understand that if you can't have the individual who may leave any day on a project where continuity is an issue, but certainly there are other projects that are always important but people don't get time on, or time to do. That can be a good area where you get people who you have their time today, make the most of it. And of course, mentoring is another way where these people can mentor other employees, share knowledge, share relationships. So the Severine, the men on the committee were saying, they just didn't believe it. They go, really, is that what happens? And there was actually a university professor in the group, and that's the word sabbatical. This happens all the time in universities, and it's never thought as a severance. And you may be gone for 6 months, for a year. Sounds a lot like parental leave, doesn't it, right? At sabbaticals, you still have email access. You still have communications. You're still part of the university, right? So there's an evolution or revolution that we need to have within companies to ensure that it's not severance, it's a sabbatical. So, and there are many companies now that are supportive of continuing email contact. And thus the next item will actually be more, what are the employees comfortable with? Employers actually are a bit concerned. They don't want to feel that they're pushing things on employees. So it's important that you have a clear conversation saying that, yes, I want to keep contact. Yes, don't worry about sending me too many emails. I don't have to reply. And also invitations to social events. There was a comment on networking. Networking is different when you're on parental leave, and yes, it's important to go to company social events or professional APEGA events to keep the communications, to keep engaged with your profession and with your employer. So there's another item here, communicate, communicate, communicate. Again, that's about keeping people engaged and keeping up the relationship with the employee and the employer. Manage expectations within your company, and if you will, employers can be champions throughout. They need to be champions for their managers who are getting new at managing people who are on leave, as well as the people who are on leave themselves. So overall, you certainly want to make a plan as an employer and stick to it. Provide support networks. In fact, I heard about this great support network within Suncor and Enbridge and more. In fact, these case studies are being published in the PEG moving forward. So we hope to have more profiles of really all these companies that are changing the corporate culture. It's exciting to see, and I know that on our committee, ConocoPhillips has mentioned that their company has stated they want to be the employer of choice for women in engineering. So what a change from when I started 25 years ago to, I hope they don't notice I'm a woman, to we now, really want to be that employer. And that shows how forward-thinking they are, and that attracts both men and women. And what we have certainly found is, I think everyone knows this already, but young men moving into the workforce, the new generation wants a better work-life balance. So what we're asking for is what they're demanding. So really this is the way of the future, and the more people we have involved today, the better it'll be for everyone sooner, because this is going to happen. So overall, certainly there's a need to coach supervisors and managers on what to expect and how to handle the situations, and hold them accountable. A lot of the stories that we hear is, often, well, frankly, when people leave companies, it's often said that they're firing their boss, right? And obviously they're going to be the older individuals. They're more likely to be 40 years plus, and they are used to things being a certain way. But if an employer says, you know what, this is our policy, then they understand that they have permission to change, and that it's not them being weak, allowing their flexible hours for their team. It's their supporting company policy and making their company an employer of choice. So very, very important changes coming forward, and I do feel a lot of support to make this happen. So next checklist for the managers and HR professionals themselves. So of course you want to have the conversation with all involved. So when your employee is planning to leave, talk about career paths and ensure that HR is aware in terms of benefits, etc. Initiate, if you haven't already done so, the conversation with your employee about how much and in what ways they want to be part of the corporate culture while they are on leave. Get them ideas like coming to the social functions, getting the company newsletter, or having access to the internet. There's, while the employee's on leave, put reminders at you as their manager, put reminders on your calendar of when you are to call them and to check in, because you don't want to forget. Certainly, you have a lot of things in front of you all the time demanding your time, so please find other ways to remind yourself to keep your people on leave engaged. Also ensure that they are on the invitation list and mailing list so they are engaged with the company while they are off, because certainly reading a company newsletter can make them feel involved, can keep them current, so that when it's not a foreign company that they're coming back to, it's one that they have been keeping up with, that they're still part of. When your employees are preparing to return, contact them ahead of time if they haven't already contacted you. I mean, what's better, employees saying, Mr. Manager, I'm coming back, are you ready for me? Or for the manager to say, Joan, look forward to having you back. How are things going? Are things all still per the original plan? If not, that's fine. You feel much more wanted if the manager makes that first step versus you as the employee feel that you're pushing your way back in. So really, managers can make a huge difference here. So you want to have the conversation about what role they'll be taking on and give serious thought about the review and merit process and how the employee will fit in. Certainly peer groups can shift. It's been a year or maybe more. And so tell your employee that people have moved to other groups and manage their expectations. Also, logistically, make sure that when they come back, they feel expected. You want to make sure that IT has re-engaged everything, that they do have a workplace, that they aren't just the person walking around in the hallway waiting for a desk to be prepared. As the employee, you're thinking, wow, they know I've been coming back for a whole year and they aren't ready yet. You start to wonder again how important you are to the organization if they can't do just some of these very simple housekeeping items that can make a huge difference, to your welcome back. Another point is to arrange for training and orientations. Policies and org structures may have changed. Prepare a briefing session on the first day back and introduce the employee to any new staff and arrange for knowledge transfer. Training is an interesting point, and there are some companies that will even support, and we recommend this, support training while someone's away on leave, because there are half-day workshops that you can certainly arrange to attend, possibly even with your child, but we all know that when you go back to work, you're arranging for childcare anyways, so if you can't arrange for a half-day, someone looking after your child when you're on leave, it's good practice for you arranging for childcare before you go back anyways. So it's wonderful to have engagement in your profession and with other professionals during that period of time, because that's one thing that I certainly found is there are a lot of people on leave, but there aren't a lot of engineers on leave. There aren't a lot of female or male engineers on that leave. So you're hungry for that opportunity, and it's good for your professional development. And it's good for, to not have that hole in your resume. Whatever happens in the future, you don't want there to be this 1 year, 2 year gap where there's nothing that shows that you're still interested in your profession. You need to keep engaged. You are interested. You need to make the time. You need to make it a priority. It's not all the time, back to the mother's guilt. You don't have to be there 100% of the time. No one can. And another thing with myself and my husband, I did recognize that he would need to be taking on more. He's also an engineer. And we agreed that both of our careers are as important. And it wouldn't be fair for me to rob my husband of a relationship with our kids by my always taking all the time. They have a very close relationship with their dad. And again, it's wonderful to see both strong mother and father relationships. So this next slide, which is quite exciting to me, is a checklist for colleagues. Because you certainly expect employer, manager, employee. There's one of the best practices that we've seen in other industries, and some companies in the oil industry have already adopted, is to have a leave liaison. So your colleagues, imagine, you don't want to, back to risk management, right? You don't want to, the employer shouldn't want to put all their eggs in one basket being that manager that may or may not get it, right? So if there are leave liaisons, colleagues that agree to keep in contact with the person on leave, check in with them on a regular basis, and someone that they can, can be more on a peer level. It's good professional development for that leave liaison as well, because they are reaching out. They're, back to the point of putting your hand up, right? You're doing something extra that you don't have to do. As a manager, I'm looking for people who are willing to take on extra initiatives, right? This is very important to build teams. It's very important mentorships, very good leadership qualities. So there's a lot, I feel there's a lot in it for the person who agrees to do this, the leave liaison. And obviously there's a lot into it for the person who's on leave, who feels potentially disconnected, to have one or two leave liaisons, people from their group, keeping in contact makes a difference. There's another great HR stat which says that people are less likely to leave a company if they have one good friend in that company. So if you have 1, 2, 3, what a difference that'll make. There's not a clock anywhere, and Laurie, I'm feeling bad. I'm going to be taking up your time, so I'll go a little bit faster on this. But yes, leave liaison is, again, a new best practice that we have incorporated in this document. So let's talk a little bit about the individuals, the professionals. Okay, so a checklist centers around the APEGA professionals and focus on what you can do to maintain your legal obligations with the association. The most important consideration in this section is maintaining your CPD, continuing professional development hours. I think everyone recognizes that you must maintain 240 professional development hours over a 3-year period to keep your license active. This is broken down into several categories, one being professional practice, another formal activity, another informal activity, another participation in activities that promote peer interaction and provide exposure to new ideas and technology to serve the public interest, such as mentoring, serving on public bodies, being part of committees, volunteering. You can see how that can fit very well while you're on leave, for sure. And then the last area where you can get these hours are in presentations. So remember when PEG is asking you to maintain your CPD over 3 years, they recommend that if you can, and you have an idea when your life, you are going to be having children, bank your CPDs beforehand, because you can use them, apply them moving forward and keep your license active. Also, the advantage of keeping your license active is that you still maintain access to the member benefits to go along with your license, like discounts and notification of branch events and annual conferences. However, you can declare non-practicing status, but know that if you go over 2 years of non-practicing status, that you will have to resubmit for an assessment by the Practice Review Board, which does take time. So keep in mind, if you're returning to the same job, you may be required to have your license in order to restart your position. So again, if you're not taken off over 2 years, you don't have to declare non-practicing status as long as you have the appropriate CPD hours. So I know that APEGA has made recent improvements to their annual slips, submission slips, where you submit your fees, where there's used to check practicing or non-practicing. There's more information there, giving you advice. Don't check non-practicing if you are just going to be out for a short period of time. But of course, there'll be more information at the APEGA booth and with Jessica and Len, should you have any questions on that. So last parts of this checklist during leave is, again, a recommendation to stay connected to the corporate culture and to prepare for on-ramping. And the interesting terms that you're going to hear more and more of is off-ramping, on-ramping, and a new word that I quite like, which is called returnship. So people have heard of internships. Well, there's returnships, right? Because you are on-ramping, and some people, can go from being on leave to working a 40-plus hour work week. That can work for some people. But that's not the only way. There are many ways, and so you can design your returnship working with your employer who really wants it to work. They don't want you to be, they shouldn't want you to be overloaded and then leave the company. That's the last thing they want. They've been waiting for you to come back. It's a real shame if it doesn't work out. So other items to prepare for on-ramping, childcare support backup, updating technical knowledge, adapting to shifting workplace dynamics, and more. One thing, when I went on leave, I was actually, the first time thinking, oh man, how am I going to be so far out of date after taking off 4 months? Right? And I'm thinking, oh no. And of course, you come back, and it did. I was not out of date. There was no issue, right? Okay, so 3 kids, right? The next time, I took off the big 6 months, right? Was I out of date? No. So really, there's, of course, it all depends on what your career is, but we're always learning, continuous learners, and really, again, in your career, taking off that 1 year is not a big deal. So please don't make it bigger. It was bigger in my mind than it was in reality. So please don't limit yourself by thinking that it's going to be a lot harder than it actually will be. So moving on, Laurie, I think I'm going to fast forward because you have an important part coming up here. We've already talked about reminders about IT and HR. Again, that should all be handled, but it doesn't hurt to remind people that you're coming back and when, just in case they were a little bit unclear. With your work, career progression is a pretty interesting one. I've seen the whole range. I've seen people come back from parental leave and receive a promotion within a couple of weeks. And so that's really good planning. It's really good planning because it's a transitional time, right? It can actually be quite logical for that to happen, for you to close off. If you've worked in several areas, your next move should be into another department. So that could work really well as a transition. So again, don't underestimate your value. Don't underestimate where your company wants to place you, because there are some great opportunities out there. So with that in mind, you know what? I think I'm just going to turn it over to you, Laurie, so that you still have some time. So if everyone can please help me welcome back Laurie Campbell.
Thanks, Gail. So the last part of the presentation is going to talk about best practices for the workplace. And as Gail said, we flipped this a little bit. We did extensive research, as much as we could, on what people were already doing in organizations that looked like best practices in helping women come back to the workplace, and then built the checklists. And we're actually talking about checklists. So a lot of you haven't seen this document, but when you do see it, you can see that we were really keen on developing a very practical tool that people could use. So checklist isn't a metaphor for something you have to remember. It's an actual paper checklist, and it will be on the website. So these checklists are built on what we were able to discover through our research on other organizations and through other research around the difficulties that women have coming back to work when they've been away for a while, and then building those practical checklists on that. And I want to also say that the programming subcommittee that developed this acknowledges that kids come to our lives in many ways. I'm an adoptive parent, and so that's a different kind of scenario than having your own baby, and that also women are in full control of when they want to on and off ramp. So there isn't any kind of expectation within this document that women will take a year off, that they are, we understand that they have their own agency about the kind of time they take away and when they want to come back. So, as I said, the next section is around best practices for the workplace and building a successful maternity-paternity leave policy that will maintain your valued employees that Gail's talked about. There's a legal difference between maternity leave and paternity leave. I think probably many people are aware of that. Maternity leave covers 15 weeks, and then parental leave, either by the mother or the father, up to 37, and that's split. And again, I think this is different, although I stand to be corrected with adoptive parents. I don't think they get the first 15 weeks. That's just for people that, for maternal leave. So this section of the document outlines 3 scenarios of practice, and our intent here is to illustrate a benchmarking document that companies can use to see where they are. Are they a company that is doing what they minimally need to do to ensure that they're meeting legal requirements and people are coming back? Is it a company that's going just a little bit further? And then the last illustration is a company that really wants to put out a Cadillac model for enticing women back and making sure that they successfully on-ramp. Ooh, Gail, you had someone tell you how to do this. I didn't get that orientation, but that worked, eh? So I won't go through the entire, and this is a matrix that you'll find in the document where you can find yourself and where your company can find yourself, place yourself, and then see where they want to go. I won't go through the entire matrix, but there's a couple of components I want to touch on that again have been repeated over and over again in companies that are doing this really well and in the research about how to do this well. So first of all, state philosophy and observed actions. This is a clear corporate attitude by upper management in support of having an outstanding maternity-paternity workplace policy. So again, not leaving it to the largesse of particular leaders, not leading it to ad hoc planning afterwards, but stating it firmly within policy. And we know that that's how organizational practice gets entrenched. The position is protected. This is a legal obligation that a company and employee agree that when a person goes on leave that they can come back to an equivalent job, and that will be saved for them when their leave is finished. Manager coaching is around setting up a professional development for your supervisor to have them prepared and how they interact with the person before going on leave and when coming back. So part of the checklist is around really being intentional about that, and then again entrenching this in policy. Insurance and health coverage is around the benefits portion. What is your company willing to cover while this person is on leave to help them financially? EI only covers up to $47,400 maximum if you are eligible for that amount. And I read a stat the other day that said if employers give a top up to women on leave, 90% of those women return. So if they have that kind of support going, they're much more likely to come back. APEGA annual dues, how will these be handled? Most companies do pay their professional member dues. Will the company still do this while the person is on leave? The leave liaison is around having trained people ready to be a peer contact, and Gail's talked about that in the checklist. So this would be an arrangement that would be up to the leave liaison, so designated, and the person going on leave. What kind of contact do they want to have? How much contact do they want to have? And I know at Enbridge that we do this already, not formally, but the women engineers are very keen on keeping in contact with their peers and really make that kind of available. Access to company email. Again, I know that policies really differ across companies with email access, so it's important to work with your IT department and HR, obviously, on this policy. There's questions of privacy. There's questions of, well, if I get my email, does that mean I'm going to work? Is the expectation that I'll work if I get my email, and so on. So something to work out, but many women have said that they would like to keep in touch because so much happens on email that indicates company change, news, and so on. Access to subscribed journals, keeping your person on leave in touch with the corporate culture. Participation in volunteer activities that Gail talked about. We've seen a trend in companies where they have dedicated hours for people to volunteer, that often companies go as teams to volunteer, and that community is becoming a pillar of business. So part of the policy will be how to treat this person on leave for things like reimbursement and facilitation of attending in-house training. This, again, is something that needs to be discussed on an individual basis, whether that person wants to come to work-related events or not, but the policy, I think, is best to open that door for them to come if they want to. Same with the point around external professional development. Ensure that it's written into the policy as an option, but will have to be negotiated case by case. Return to work. So ensure that flexible hours are negotiable if possible, and arranging for childcare and possibly reimbursing it should be considered. Now again, we're talking about kind of a Cadillac model here. The next point also touches upon that, opening the conversation to job sharing. I know that many companies have flexible work arrangements. It's good to check and see what your company has with respect to that, and see how you can work with those company policies to, if you want to negotiate less time when you come back, part-time, job sharing, that kind of thing. Ensure the policy includes a returnship or on-ramping program where the person is assigned a mentor, training, orientation, and it's very similar to starting a new employee. The advantage, though, is that this person already knows the corporate culture, and then getting them up to speed should be quite fast compared to training a brand new and junior employee. And the company should also consider the development of employee resource groups. And we have one at Enbridge, and we have Lorna Heron here today, who is the founder and chair of a group called Feminine, Females in Engineering. And they have taken up many of these issues. The membership came to Lorna and said, these are issues for us around work-life balance. So that's a very powerful employee resource group that's really connecting the women at Enbridge. And Lorna has lots of information with her about that. Lorna, do you want to wait? If anyone who wants to find out about that employee resource group and perhaps how we got started at Enbridge, but those are really good organizational structures to put in place for women for support. Role modeling is also essential. Showcase people who have successfully used the policy, perhaps in ways that you didn't consider. So getting them to speak at functions like this, to mentor others and to provide support. So I've shared this even though I'm not strictly in the engineering group at Enbridge. This is obviously an issue for women on and off ramping in all parts of the organization. So there's been a lot of interest in it in all parts of the organization. So I'm bringing it to my HR leaders. I'm trying to find people. I have an employee myself that's going off on maternity leave in March. So we're going to pilot it together. That kind of thing. So it's really good. We're really looking for some good feedback on how people are actually using this on the ground. And finally, the last point's around writing these policies and making them part of your employee handbooks. So that is the basis of the research on best practices from which we constructed the checklist. And now I'm going to turn it back to Gail to finish up with a few more words about women in APEGA. And then we'll take questions and comments from the audience, right?
All right, thank you, Laurie. So, Laurie is, by the way, the chair of the program subcommittee. And so if anyone afterwards have any ideas on new programs that they really think can make a difference to improving their retention, advancement, and attraction of women in the professions, please take some time to touch base with Laurie. All right, so other references and resources other than people here in the room, and in fact, just like asking Lorna to wave her hand, she's also incoming, she's vice chair of the Women in APEGA Committee, as well as there's Jessica Vandenberg here, Director of Member Services, and Senior Director Len Shrimpton of APEGA over on that table, who will also be at the booth, I hear. So these people are really looking for your input, really welcoming engagement. So other references and resources, other than the people I've already identified in this room, are a lot of information and case studies. That will actually become part of the Women in APEGA website. Also, many of you are aware of University of Calgary has a Women's Advancement Office, has really good web pages on resource information. Catalyst is an outstanding resource, and I know that Catalyst is providing APEGA members and member companies 10% discount, I believe, for a lot of their information, as well as there's articles about the issues and other support groups. There are companies that may not be large enough to have their own internal resource group, but there are groups outside of that. So the Alberta Women's Science Network, which actually is based in Calgary, will accept people from obviously any and all companies who want to make a difference in this space, and other organizations like Wisest and Wiser. So again, easy to Google, but these links will be on the Women in APEGA website in the future. So there's Jessica's information if you need anything further, and this would be a good time for questions.
So just a reminder, there are some mics floating around the room. If you can find a mic. Thank you. I was just wondering how like the keeping in touch thing during parental leave. So if you attended training or something, if you would get paid for that, if that would affect your employment insurance, or like, I don't know how the policy works, but.
And I have HR professionals here who say that it will affect your unemployment insurance for sure. So certainly that's something that you can work on with your HR department. But I would, I find myself as a manager that you're looking big picture. You want to be engaged. Some of those things are just small, right? Myself, I wasn't looking to get paid for that professional development time. I just wanted to continue with my career. So you're right. There's some fine tuning working with your HR department, and that's an important thing to consider.
Yeah, I guess it's just, I moved here from the UK. I've had 2 children, one in the UK and one here. And I know in the UK there's a policy whereby you can get, I think it's up to 4 days. They're called keeping in touch days,
Oh.
paid, and it doesn't affect your maternity payments. And so the company I work for, ISL Engineering, we're developing an employment equity policy. And that's one of the things we've looked at, and so that's why I was asking the question. Like,
Well, and
can
thank
we
you
pay
for,
them?
for that additional information, because I see HR people taking notes, and this is good. This is good. Really, this is a great brainstorming, sharing of best practices.
Yeah, I think we know more about this than I would, but in terms of policy and benefits, but I think what organizations wanted to avoid is on and off ramping people. So bringing them onto the payroll, taking them off, bringing them on, taking them off. So something like that would be a really good idea.
Right.
It has a kind of flexible arrangement. Yeah.
And there can hopefully be some banking time. That may be something that could be considered. One thing that you know, it sounds like your company is very engaged in defining solutions, which is wonderful. There are other companies that are just getting started, and the more obstacles you put in their way, the less likely they're going to want to move forward. So I think everyone's pretty reasonable at relationship management here. So you do gauge the appetite and recognize that if you're looking to ensure you get a couple of full compensation, you may hurt your greater goal. But wonderful to have new practices that, as trailblazers, you're putting forward for others. And again, something that's easy, again, checklists, part of that's to make these programs easy to implement and to understand. If you give some solutions, people are very interested in that. So thank you for proposing that solution. Is there another question there? Just movement.
Hi, I have a question. It's almost a bit of a side question to this, I guess. But we're women and we're engineers, so I'm sure a lot of us here like to plan. And in our companies these days, there's a lot of career development planning. People want to know our short-term plans, 5-year, long-term. Do you see any value at all in disclosing in your plans with your managers, perhaps if you're planning to start a family? Because I've heard both sides. I've heard the, no, you never disclose it till it's an issue. And I've heard, yes, you want to communicate those things because that is part of your plan.
I think this is something where perhaps you'll have expert opinions, but no real answer based on your case. But you know, I like some of the things that were said earlier today, that if you were a man and you said you're planning to have a family, no one asked that question, right? So yeah, that's how I always judged my actions. You know, if for my husband, what would they expect of him? Well, they should expect the same of me. So I wouldn't put an obstacle out to your career progression, which is, oh, well, you know, if they aren't going to be with us, or if they aren't going to be able to continue the momentum, you know, for this 5-year period, then we're going to put them on less important projects. And no one knows what the future has in store for them. It may be difficult to have children. There may be so many things that happen there. I would focus on a career plan, always recognizing that at some point in life, you know, family, things happen, right? There could be a death in the family. There could be all sorts of things that take your career off your original path. But aim high and, you know, keep that momentum going. And with that, I think you'll get a lot further and have a more fulfilling career than if you start slow. It's hard to gain momentum that way.
Can I just add to that? I think one of the things that we have to consider when we talked about the sponsors, the ability to have sponsors. Oh, thanks. There. So one of the things that I would also keep in mind as a people leader, and I actually encourage everybody to be open, honest, and transparent with me. So I have a gal who is one of my supervisors who will probably in the next 2 to 3 years be wanting to start having a family. And I told her, absolutely no obstacle. It's such a short time in your career. So I think a lot of these examples that you'll see will be people leader dependent. So I may have one perspective, but you may have someone else working for you who may not have that. So you really need to have that relationship and understand who it is that you're dealing with, I think, to make those decisions.
And I will say too, I mean, people understand that there's a certain age people have children, and most people have children, right? So even though you aren't saying it out loud, it's not going to be a, oh man, she's going on parental leave, she didn't mention it. Well, it's really not that much of a surprise. So I wouldn't feel too concerned about revealing that kind of detail or not, because they know that people are very likely to have children. So I would focus on a career discussion versus my family discussion. Back. Absolutely. And with many good reasons, of course, because at one time law, medicine, finance, senior finance circles were majority men, and now there are so many women. So they should have a lot of learnings that we can adopt. And I know there's a specific document from the Chartered Accountants Association that was really useful. So we will continue to take information from other sources and from other countries, and certainly welcome that input. And like any good engineering document or project, we do see this as a continuous improvement initiative. So this is Rev 1, of which we hope to have many future Revs. I know that, again, whenever we share this document, people recognize that we're looking for input. And so if there's anything that you see a value that's not there, let us know, right? And that's an opportunity for it to be there in next year's revision, and so on. All right, I will turn it. Oops, we have one more question, and then I'll turn it back to the next speaker.
The standards obviously only for Alberta. How is it spreading with the other provincial?
Sure, that's a great question. And again, it's Alberta's the place to be. It's quite exciting. Actually, due to Len and his leadership, the target of 30% women in APEGA professions by 2030 was the first time a target. Anyone had the guts to put a target out there, and was it ever received very positively? Engineers Canada, which is the Association of Engineering Associations across Canada, also adopted that target. And I was at a CC West conference, Canadian Coalition of Women in Engineering Science, Technology and Trades, which has a conference every 2 years. The next one's in Regina in May. I hope many of you will be able to attend. But Engineers Canada has a meeting at that same time, and the Engineers Canada staff, as well as the other provincial reps, state that they are all looking to Alberta for leadership. They have really seen that we are the trailblazers. And it's exciting to see how quickly others are able to gain traction, saying, look at Alberta, how can we be so far behind? We need to do something. And APEG BC is now very close behind us. They have a great, strong committee, great, strong initiatives, and more. So this is really helping drive change across Canada. And this document has been shared, and that's part of the process. So Engineers Canada has a Women in Engineering group, and we share best practices across Canada. And so this document will be one that they can, in fact, take on their own, build upon, and so on. So we do have a lot of support and a lot of opportunities for engagement and for improvement. All right, thank you, everyone.